We're ready, Cheryl?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you and good morning. I'm pleased to be here today with a number of my cabinet colleagues to talk about how the interim supply bill will restore stability and begin to strengthen Alberta's education, health, and human services. With this bill, our government is following through on our commitment to start putting the needs of Albertans and their families first. We will each briefly describe what this money will mean for stability to essential public services, and then we'll be happy to take some questions. Every family relies on the healthcare system at some point, and they deserve the very best care and quality that we can provide. Today, I'm happy to announce that we are reversing the cuts to frontline health services to ensure stable, predictable funding for acute care, including hospitals. This funding means that we will avoid cutting over 1,500 healthcare worker positions. Alberta's doctors will be able to see more patients, and Alberta Health Services will be able to honor negotiated contracts. We all know that Albertans would have been negatively impacted by the cuts proposed by the previous government's budget. And Albertans knew that too, and that's why they rejected it. It would have meant no additional money to cover things like people moving to Alberta who need health services, more babies being born in our province, more seniors and those with chronic disease needing care. Our government has been clear that health stability and protecting and improving public health care is a top priority. This interim funding will help us provide Albertans with stable and strong public health care systems that are in place for Albertans and their families when they need it. And we will, of course, continue to analyze all of our healthcare spending as we put together a wholesome budget for the fall. And we'll have and we'll have more to say in the weeks and months ahead about the fall budgeting process. But for today, I'm very proud to let you know that this is a first step that our government is making to maintain and strengthen our healthcare system for all Albertans. And now I will turn next comments over to my colleague, the Minister of Education.
Well, thank you very much for coming here today. Securing a bright future for our children ensures that we have a bright future for all of us here in the province. And an important step to providing a positive learning environment for our students is proper funding. In May, I was very proud to stand with the Premier when she announced the restoration of grant funding and the funding for enrollment here in the province. With this interim supply bill now, we are taking an important step to demonstrating our commitments to parents, to students, to school boards, and to teachers across the province. This interim supply bill ensures that 12,000 new students starting school in Alberta in the fall will have the tools they need to get the best education possible. This money will also ensure that our students, whether they are in kindergarten, entering their senior year of high school, will have the stable support they deserve in the upcoming school year. The funding will recover all regular operations, including funding for school capital projects to maintain the teachers' agreement and the commitment made in May to reverse grant cuts and fully fund enrollment. Our government has been very clear that protecting and supporting our schools is a key investment in our families and in all of our futures. The interim funding will ensure schools can operate normally until a full budget can be delivered in the fall. Albertans elected this government on the assurance that we would give students a strong start in our education system. We have much more work to do, but I am very pleased to tell you about the first steps we are taking to ensure that this happens right now. Thank you very much, and I now turn you over to my colleague, the Minister of Human Services.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's been said that the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its more vulnerable members. Vulnerable people are not less deserving of our support simply because of the province's economic circumstances. Today, I'm proud to announce that our interim supply legislation allows us to provide stable funding so we can help Albertans better deal with the tough times. This funding reinvests in services that Alberta's most vulnerable people rely on. Increased funding to human services program will strengthen services for 7,100 children in care. Vulnerable families will have support they need to lead successful lives in their communities. This funding will expand a number of vital programs that are already in place, offering stability and improving the quality of life for our children and families at risk. That means more funding for children in need of care and families struggling with healthy relationships. It also means we will be able to better support vulnerable Aboriginal children and explore new models to support their families and communities. This money also includes the first funding to establish the Women Ministry to begin to look at how we can address issues such as pay equity. There is no question that in these times, without increased funding, more of the most vulnerable Albertans and their families would have faced increased hardship. It would have meant less support for those fleeing violence, including women and children experiencing family violence, less support for family counseling services, and no support to deal with equality of women. Our government has been clear that we are committed to doing the right thing for vulnerable children and families, paying more attention to specific needs of Aboriginal children in need of support, and ensuring we are working towards greater fairness for women. We have much to do, and we will be looking at these issues more closely as we consider our budget in fall. But for today, I'm proud that we are making a start to ensuring that Albertans enjoy quality of life that reflects our province's prosperity and potential. It's about fairness and putting our money where our hearts are or should be. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to my colleague, the Minister of Innovation and Advanced Education.
Thank you and good morning. As my colleagues have said, our interim supply bill is about restoring stability to the public services that people count on. And for me, for all of us, chief among those services is quality post-secondary education that prepares Albertans to succeed as individuals and as members of our communities. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that funding in this bill will help support the immediate tuition freeze while setting the course for future budgets and extend the freeze for 2 years. This funding will also roll back market modifiers that were introduced in December 2014 for 25 programs across this province. Post-secondary education has to be accessible, and that includes keeping it affordable for students and families. Access to post-secondary education is more than just about affordability, however. It is also about removing barriers and reducing inequalities so every student can pursue an education or a career goal. We expect post-secondary educational institutions to follow this example and freeze mandatory non-instructional fees as well. This certainty will allow our educators to focus on delivering Canada's best education and training. That will help an estimated 250,000 full-time and part-time learners develop the skills that job creators are looking for. There's no question that without the funding we are proposing in this bill, fewer people would be able to afford to start post-secondary education or training programs. Key programs may have been adversely affected, and post-secondary institutions may have had to consider reductions in staff. This government is proud to support the education and believes our plan will ensure students' personal success and shared prosperity. Moving forward, You can count on our government to work with post-secondary institutions and other partners to develop a sustainable system that creates opportunities for all Albertans. This interim bill is our government's first step to that future. It will maintain stability in these essential public services as our government reviews budget priorities. There's a great deal to be done, but today, we are proud to have taken the first important steps in protecting and strengthening healthcare, education, human services, and post-secondary education here in Alberta. Thank you. We will now take some questions.
I don't quite understand, because this is a news conference about funding changes, funding additions. We have a news conference, and we have a news release that doesn't mention any of the bottom line numbers. How much is this going to cost, and how are you going to pay for it?
Well, I could speak specifically about post-secondary, and so it's an addition of $40 million that we are, that is in our interim supply bill. And I could break down the specifics about each item. That was fine.
How are you going to pay for this?
Well, the $40 million is part of the interim supply bill, and we have the funding. We will be going forward in our budget in the fall to do additional allocations for money, but it is something that's available to us.
I have a question for Minister Sabir, please, for Human Services. Will this funding include restoring funding to the Children's Advocate?
The funding for Children Advocate is voted by the Assembly, and that's a different funding, but this funding includes $39 million in new commitments.
Do you want to see that funding restored to the Children's Advocate? I know that he's an officer, or it's an officer of the legislature, but is this something that you would like to see resolved?
Yes, we would like to see more funding and more oversight, independent oversight, to make sure that the services we are providing are watched by somebody independent, so that public can have trust and confidence in those services.
And the bulk of that $39 million, which department will get most of it?
I think it will be prorated among many different services, but I can point towards few, like Children's Intervention Services. It will go towards FCSS, and $1 million was the commitment for the women ministry. $1 million out of that will be going to that one, and other portion will be going to strengthening services for communities and families.
How many new beds are you going to add through FCSS?
Pardon me?
How many new shelter beds are you adding through FCSS?
We will be providing services to FCSS. FCSS basically works differently where communities come up with their programs, and we have a partnership with them. They tailor programs according to their local needs. So whatever those communities thinks is needed in their communities, government support those initiatives.
You're saying you're adding beds. Do you have an idea of what that
We
number
will
is?
be adding some money towards women's shelters and second stage housing, and we will be working closely with Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, and we will provide more services in that area. Definitely, that's one thing we will be looking very closely to.
Can you tell us what the percentage increase is for each ministry? This funding?
I don't know exactly what percentage it will be, but overall budget for this period will be $1.804 billion, and that will include $39 million in new commitments.
Are you all assuming that the planned tax hikes will be covering off these increases? Is that how you plan to pay for this?
Minister Hoffman, did you want to answer the overall questions?
Sure.
And in terms of the percentages, Darcy, if you want to follow up with Cheryl, we can make sure we get you that exact number. For example, in health, what's been allocated through the Assembly is $7.8 billion. $500 million of that is new money. So basically, the interim supply bill that was passed back in the spring, it's a continuation of that with additional funding for our 4 ministries that we're talking about here today. So $500 million in health, 39 million, 40 million,
103.
$103 million. So the interim supply bill bill for 5 months, plus additional funds in those areas to meet the sort of key areas in the platform that need immediate addressing. So ensuring that we fund growth, ensuring that, so for healthcare, there were $160 million in cuts that would have been in the budget. Those are being reversed, as well as $340 million to fund growth. So we're expecting about 70,000 new Albertans needing to access the healthcare system, whether they're moving to Alberta, having babies, whatever the means may be. And just like we have 12,000 new students, when we have 70,000 new Albertans, we need to make sure that public health care is there for them when they need it.
So I'm sorry, back to my question.
Yes.
How are you going to pay for this? How are you paying for the additional spending?
yeah, absolutely.
Are you just going to add it to the deficit?
So right now, it's in the interim supply bill, which is about how we're going to supply the funds out to the ministries. The fall will have all of the details around the budget.
You must have an idea. I mean, you're not going to start spending extra money without
Yeah.
having an idea how you're going to pay for it.
It was in our platform.
How are you going to pay for it?
It was in our platform, so there will, of course, be some debt financing. We've also talked about ways that we're going to move forward to ensure that we have a balanced budget. Our plan is to be there in 4 years. So the exact details on how the revenue will come, this is about supplying funds out to the ministry to make sure that we can make sure that, hospitals can keep their lights on, that teachers can be hired over the summer to ensure that there's kids.
But you're adding money. You're making
We are adding
initiatives
money,
here.
yep, and
it sounds
it's
like
been
you're
outlined in
doing
our
it without
platform.
really being sure how you're going to pay for it.
No,
other
no,
than
we-
to add to the deficit.
We outlined it in our platform, how we were gonna have additional revenue. Another bill before the House, of course, is the tax reform bill that we'll continue to be debating, and we'll see where the progress moves on that over the next few days ahead. So of course, we're working towards ensuring there's additional revenue, but Albertans made it very clear during the election that they did not want to see cuts to healthcare and education and human services. And this announcement is this government's commitment to fulfilling the mandate that Albertans gave us on May the 5th.
Mr. Hawker, where's that funding going in health, the additional funding, the $340 million? What areas?
Primarily funding growth, so those 70,000 new students, or not new students, sorry, 70,000 new Albertans who require doctors, who require nurses, who require EMS services. This is the high level, we're gonna inject money back into the system. $1.1 billion was proposed in the previous government's budget. We're working, we worked through the House to ensure that we have $500 million in a timely fashion to ensure that we don't have those cuts moving forward between now and the end of November. We will have a budget before the House in the months ahead so that we can flesh out the details, but this is to ensure that we don't have those deep cuts moving forward.
And is this directly to Alberta Health Services?
A combination between Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services.
Take a question here and then we'll go to the
How
phones.
much money do you need to fund new debt and deficits? How much would be okay?
So this is about the supply piece, so this is about ensuring that we can get money out to actually do the operating. When we talk about the specific debt and how we're gonna be dealing with that, that'll be in the fall budget.
There's no additional expenses in regards to additional debt? If you're adding to the expenses, you're borrowing some of this money. Is there any additional costs associated?
At this point, we don't believe that there will be. This is something that previous government did back in April to ensure that they could keep operations moving forward, and this is the same thing that we're doing. We're just making sure that we inject the money into these 4 key ministries that we're going to be under significant cuts. Students were going to be paying significantly higher tuition if we didn't make these actions, and wait times would have gone up, frankly, with 70,000 new Albertans coming into the healthcare system unless we worked in a timely fashion to make sure that we injected this money back into the system.
We're gonna go to the phones now. Operator, are there calls on the line?
A question from Rick Bell with CalPerencia.
Good morning. This is for Minister Hoffman, since you were pretty good at summarizing it. I just want to make sure I have the arithmetic right here. That my impression is over and above what the previous government had budgeted, you're putting in an extra $500 million in health, 103 in education, 40 in post-secondary, and 39 in health and human services for the grand total of $682 million. Is that correct?
That sounds like the right math to me. Those numbers that you said are all the different ministries.
Just so I'm clear, it's $682 million more than what the previous government would have spent. This is in addition to what was in the budget in the spring under the previous government.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the phone?
Not at this time.
Mr. Sigurdsson, the previous budget cut funding to post-secondary institutions. If you impose a tuition freeze, that also reduces the funding coming into the institutions. Are you confident that the $40 million both covers the cuts in funding and covers the less money the institutions will get in tuition?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Yes, it does, and we are restoring funding, the 1.4 million, 1.4% cut of the previous government that gives us 28 million that we're putting back in. The tuition freeze, so that would sort of put institutions on the hook because they've raised tuition already, but we are restoring funding for that to 15 million for that. And also with the targeted enrollment, we've included 22 million. And we've also done, base operating grant funding for 2% increase, and that supports the cost of living. So institutions will have the money and students will have the money. So we are taking into account how it's impacting institutions.
The previous government, when they made these cuts, they encouraged the institutions to find efficiencies, to look at underperforming programs, in areas like that. I mean, are you worried at all that some of that work that might have yielded real financial benefits won't happen now because you're adding in the money?
Well, institutions on a regular basis review programs that maybe are, not have low enrollment or aren't really providing what's needed in the marketplace. So that work has already been undertaken by those institutions. And so this money won't necessarily reverse any of those decisions. It may reverse some, because it is restoring some significant money to them. But some of those efficiencies may be found and they'll be kept. And we'll be reviewing that with all the institutions. So I think that work was well done and it can continue.
Minister, there seemed to be almost a philosophy going forward from the previous government that institutions really had to look at underperforming or almost put parameters on the number of students before a program would continue. Is this I guess a sea change from your government? I mean, is that still a priority for institutions to look at, say, how many students are in a program before it continues, things like that?
Well, I mean, there's lots of factors that educational institutions are looking at to see what, makes sense in terms of programs that are needed and the demand in the marketplace for those kind of people with that educational background. So there is a review of that. I mean, I think with this money, we're giving institutions confidence that we are committed to stable funding for them. So, these years of cutbacks under the previous regime will create some stability for them to make some great decisions on what's best for what programs to move forward on.
Mr. Sigurdson, we saw today another increase in the number of EI recipients in Alberta. I think it's 6 months in a row when it's been growing. What is the government going to do in relation to, how big of a concern is sort of growing unemployment in the province, and what are you going to do to address that issue?
Well, certainly, having a good job is really important in Alberta, and there's, several things that the government is moving forward on and looking into. One of those things is increasing minimum wage too, so that we know from some stakeholders that actually employers who do provide minimum wage have more stability in their staff. They retain them, they don't have to go through that recruitment process so often, and they don't have to do additional training. So I think creating a marketplace that provides good jobs that have good pay will create much more stability and jobs for the long term.
Thanks, guys.
There's been a problem with motel rooms in Edmonton.
Do you want to just take this last question, Minister Sabir, and then we're going to wrap it up, guys.
I'm just wondering if the 39 million will help you address that issue that's arisen here, especially here in Edmonton.
As I said, that amount will be prorated in different programs, and to maintain and improve those programs. And we are definitely committed to providing safe and stable housing for everyone who is in need of those services.
Do you have any of this money specifically targeted to that problem?
Like I said, we are committed to providing safe and stable housing for everyone, and that money will definitely help us achieve that goal. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.